Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. I hope everyone is having another fantastic day today. And in today's video, we'll be working and focusing on using the MERN stack to create this simple app here in which takes in the name and the age of an employee, and we'll have it rendered right underneath it. And this is going to be, yes, it's going to be a MERN stack app, but we are going to be replacing the M for MongoDB. Instead, we're going to be using MySQL. So it's going to look something like this. So as you can see, we'll add some employee names. So I was watching wrestling the other day, so we'll just add a cactus Jack, and we'll have his age 33. So as you can see, we hit the submit form and he comes up here. The next one we can add is Denzel Washington, and then we'll have him 56. Add him, as you can see, refetching the data, and it automatically comes right towards the bottom. And lastly, let's go ahead and make Will Smith, and he can be 24. So submit form, and he's also there. Now what we can do is we can either delete it just like that seamlessly, or we can also update it. So let's change Denzel Washington to George Washington. So we'll say George Washington and update. Perfect. And look at that, guys. So that's the type of pretty simple application that we're going to make. And once again, it's just a tutorial because I know in the previous videos, it's been mostly using MongoDB as part of the MERN stack. But for this video, I thought it would be fun as well to show how to use and how to connect MySQL using the MERN stack. So let's get started, guys. So the first thing that we're going to do is, of course, as with the other videos as well, hopefully you guys been getting in that nice practice. That way you can keep things separated, right? So what we're going to do is create a folder. And this folder that I created is going to be called MySQL-practice. And inside of the folder, we're going to create two folders. That way we can keep things separated and a little bit more organized, in which the first one is going to be our front end and the second one is going to be our back end. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So what we're going to do is just open up the terminal here. And then once you're in the terminal, just make sure that here has the name of your folder. That way you can know that you're inside of your folder. And then we're just going to type in mkdir front end and then mkdir backend in order to create those two folders. And as you can see, they were just created. We have the front end and the back end here. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is a little bit different from the previous videos. I know in the previous videos we started off in our back end, but for this video we're going to start on our front end. So what we're going to do is just cd into your front end, just like this. You're going to type in cd space front end. And as you can see, the name of the folder changed from the name of your folder, in which this case mine is MySQL practice, to front end. Once again, just make sure that you do have front end here instead of your root folder here, just because if you end up installing, let's say, Tailwind, it's not going to work because it needs to be inside of your front end along with what's inside of your React app. Okay, so once we are in our front end, speaking about creating our React app, we're going to create it. So we're going to say npx create React app, and let's call this SQL MERN, something like that. So it's going to take a while. So let's just wait until this loads. Perfect. So as you can see, it was pretty much done installing the React app. So what we're going to do now is cd into the name of your folder of your create a React app or your React app. So we're going to say cd space SQL MERN, since that's what I called mine. And once again, just make sure that you do have it here, as you can see. Perfect. So now what we're going to do here is we are just going to go on our front end and install, of course, Tailwind. So we can just go to Tailwind installation, and then we can just go ahead and follow steps 1 through 3. So we're just going to first install Tailwind, and then second, get to the second step, and then just remember to copy and paste the paths here into your tailwind.config file right inside of the content here. So the next thing that we're going to do here is go to your third step, which is adding the Tailwind directives to each of Tailwind's layers in your main CSS file. So we can just go ahead and copy this. And then, as I mentioned in the previous videos as well, what I like to do is just delete a lot of these files here. So if you're using a Mac, what you can do is just click and then command, and then just click the ones that you don't need. So we're going to get rid of the setup test, report web vitals, logo, and the app test. So you can just go ahead and have that deleted just like that, and just double check here as well. So those are the ones that we want deleted. Perfect. So we can go ahead and X the config file for Tailwind and just open up all of them here. So now that we are in our app.css file, we can just go ahead and copy all of it and paste using Command A and then Command V. Mac. On the Windows, it's I think Control A and then Control V as well. So what we're going to do now is we can go ahead and just close out of this app.css file. And then now we should have the app.js file opened. The import logo, we can just go ahead and erase that. And we can go from the header on the bottom to the header to the top, or header to the top, header to the bottom, whichever you prefer. We can just go ahead and delete that as well here. And then lastly, it's going to take us to our index.js file, the last one here, and we can just go ahead and delete this report web vitals, and as well as these comments here and the import of the report web vitals, just like that. So now we're pretty much done with setting up our React page here. Oh, and I forgot this as well, the index.css file. So this one we're not going to use, so you can just go ahead and just copy everything and just delete it. I don't know why I tend to have it open, but I just tend to leave it there. So you can just go ahead and delete everything inside of it, and you can just X out of it. Perfect. So what we're going to do now is just create a folder that's called pages inside of your source folder. So let's go ahead and do that. New folder, call it pages. And then inside of the pages, we're going to make a new file and we're going to name it home. That way it could be our home page. For me, I'm not really big on using the app.css because you can use it. It's not a problem, but I tend to just create another home page. That way I can just import it here. That way it stays out of the app here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use RFCE. And if you would like to have those snippets, what I always recommend pretty much in every video so far is the extension here. If you go to the extensions, and it should be this one here, ES7 React Redux React Native snippets. It's pretty good. That way you don't have to write out the whole function as well here in order to render the page. And once again, once you have it, you can just create the file, the home.js file, and then just type in RFCE, and then you can just click it and it should show something like this. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is just import the home inside of our app. So we can just go ahead and do that. We're going to say home just like that. That way it can be inside of the app here. And then at times you can autofill it as well. Sometimes it doesn't work for me for whatever reason. And it looks like it's actually, yeah, it's working nice. So in order to do that, you can just, after the E, you can just hit Control and spacebar. You should get that little snippet there that once you click it, it pretty much autofills right for you. That way you don't have to do it as well. But it's always good practice to manually do it. That way you can just get that practice in. So now what we're going to do here is we are just going to go to our home and we are just going to start up our React server. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to type in npm start. So if we move this to the right side, you should see this here. Perfect. And as you can see, it says home there. So we are good to go now. So now the first thing that we are going to do is just make some space. So let's just click out of that just like that. Awesome. Now we're just going to set up the page here. And what we're going to do, I like just to have things just like kind of like in the dark because like light mode tends to hurt my eyes at times, but especially like if it's the night or whatnot. But let's just make it eye friendly. So we'll just go back to our app.js file here, and at the div, the first div here next to the app, let's just add the background color of 1A, just like that. And then we can just say our width, we want it to be full, and our height, let's say we want it to be 1200 pixels or something like that. That way the whole thing could be perfect. Awesome. And now we can just go ahead and go back to the home, just like that. Now let's get started. So we can just go back to this div here. And then the next thing that we're going to write is make our H1. And then our H1 is going to say employee form. And once again, it's going to be a really short employee form, which is just going to intake the name and the age. Later on, we can start putting more values that we want to, like date, the hire date, their birthday as well, if you want to include that, or any other thing that you'd like to add as well into your project. So once we have our H1 here, we're just going to make a div, and then inside of the div, we're going to make a form. And then with the form, we're going to have a label, and then the label is going to be employee name. And then just to keep things a little separated, we're going to make a break there. Then after that, we're going to make an input for our form. Then after the input, actually from here, after the input, you can go ahead and just make 2 breaks here, 1 and 2. And then if you want, you can just make a comment here. And then for the comment, we'll say this is going to be employee name input. And then after that, we can just go ahead and copy and paste it, since it's going to be the same thing. And then this one is going to be employee age input. And then we're going to say employee age, just like that. Awesome. So now after you have this input here, the next thing that we're going to do is create our button. So creating our button is pretty simple. We're just going to make a tag, a button, and then the button is going to be called submit form. Now we can pretty much go ahead and style everything, especially because of how it looks here. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing that we're going to do is with the div here, we're just going to have the class, and then we're going to say we want it to be width full, and then H1, we want it to be about 1200 pixels, just like that. So after we have that, what we're going to do here is we move on to the H1, and then for the H1, we can just say text center, move it to the center. We can say text, we want the text color to be zinc, that nice like grayish color, and let's say 300. How it looks, awesome. And now with padding, so let's add some padding 5. And lastly, let's make the text a little bigger. So let's add a text 3XL. And look at that, guys. Perfect. So now what we can do is we move on to the next div here where we have our form. So we can just go ahead and type in class name. And then we're going to say flex to move it up here. And then let's say justify center, because we want it in the middle here. And let's say just like that. Perfect. So the next thing that we're going to work on is going to be our label. So our label here, we can just go ahead and add a class name. And then the only thing we're going to add is just a text white. That way you can actually see it there. And then we're going to do the same thing for this label here, text white. Perfect. And now I should have done this as well, but the next thing that we're going to do is go to the input and then use your option button on the Mac to be able to type in simultaneously with option and then clicking the other place that you like to type in. So it's going to be after the T. And then once you have those two blinking, you're going to make a class name just like that. And then this one, we're going to say, oh, what happened there? Do this again. There you go. Class name. And then this one is going to be width of, let's say, about 400 pixels. Then we're going to add a height of about 50 pixels. Let's use that really nice zinc color that I love so much now. And let's say we're going to say 600 to make the inside of it nice. Let's add some padding. That way, as you can see, if we write, it's not going to be too close to the border here. So let's go and add a padding of about 2. Awesome. And then let's go ahead and add a text. Is it still? Oh, no, it's not. I'll just copy and paste that. We go text and we want it to be white. Just like that. Awesome. So after the text white, what we're going to do is we're just going to round the borders as well. So what we can do is just say rounded large. We just want it to be a little large, just like that. And then border, let's just add a color of orange and 600. And then let's just add the border as well. That way we can actually see it. Perfect. Just like that, guys. And then we can just go ahead and copy. I believe it was from the P2 here. So let's just copy and paste it here. I think why it wasn't working is because I ended up clicking out of it to go over here. That's why. But perfect. So now that we have that, we can just go ahead and work on our button here. So we're going to make a class name for our button. And then we're just going to say width of 400 pixels. So let's go ahead and add that. So we're going to say width 400 pixels. And then we want it to have a height, of course, as normal with what we had up top for our input. We're going to have height of 50 pixels, text to be white, have a border as of course. And then we want the background color to be that same 1A, 1A, 1A. What's going on here? There we go. And lastly, we want to hover. So of course, I enjoy having different effects for your hover. So whenever I hover over a button or anything. So this one, let's see how 600 looks. Let's see how 800 looks. Oh, perfect. Yeah, I enjoy 800 better. Perfect. So we have our button here. Now, what we can do next is focus pretty much on our backend. So now that we have our front end pretty much set, we can focus on our backend now. So let's just open this extension here, and let's just open this up, and then we can just close this right here. That way we don't get confused there. So now what we're going to do here, we can just actually just open this up, and I like to have everything running at the same time. That way you don't have to like go ahead and turn off the switch and then turn it back on. So we can just leave the React server running because we're going to be using for our backend port 3001. So you can just go ahead and make a split terminal down here in the terminal here. And then in the terminal, we're going to already be in our SQL-MERN app, React app. So we can just go ahead and cd out of it. So we can just go cd space ... and then you should be inside of your front end. So you can go ahead and cd once again out of that. That way you can be inside of your root folder where everything is going to be inside of it. Awesome. Now what we're going to do here is cd into our backend, just like that. And now just make sure that you have backend here instead of MySQL practice or front end or even your SQL-MERN folder here. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is just set up our backend. And how we're going to do that is just two things. The first one is going to be making a file, a server. So we're just going to type in touch, just like that, and then server.js. And then once you click enter or hit enter, you should see that the file was already created, and it's going to be right here. We're done with that. And on a Mac, it's touch server.js, but on Windows, it should be code server.js, or the name of the file that you're looking to call it. So now that we have that, the next thing that we're going to do is install our JSON packages. So we go about doing so by just typing in npm init. And we don't want to keep on like pressing enter, so you can just bypass all of that and have it installed right away by just adding -y. So as you can see, it's already done. You can just go inside, you'll see everything's good to go, and this is where our dependencies are going to be installed. And we're not going to use too many dependencies for this one. It's going to be about maybe 3. So speaking of dependencies, let's go ahead and install them. So if you go back to your terminal here, you can just easily install them by typing in npm I or npm install. And then what we're going to use is Express. We're going to use cores, just like that. So npm I express cores. And then lastly, we're going to use MySQL. So you can say MySQL, just like that. And once you have that, you can just go ahead. And Nodemon as well. Nodemon, perfect. And you can just go ahead and hit return, and you should see them being installed. Once they're installed, they're going to show up as dependencies in your package.json. So just make sure that you have them here. There were 4, and we have the 4 of them here, and their current versions that they're running on. So now once we have that, we can just go ahead back into our server. Where did it go? Oh, I never opened it. So you can just go ahead and open your server, and let's go ahead and just import those as well. So remember, how to import is just making them pretty much into a variable. So we're going to say const express equals require express, just like that. And if you can guess the next one, I'll give you a high five. So if you said either const MySQL or cores, you get a high five. So we say MySQL equals require, and then MySQL. And then lastly, const cores, which equals require and then cores. So basically what we did here is we are using these dependencies in order to build up our backend. So our backend is going to consist of the Express, and Express is going to help with setting up our server or connecting to our server. MySQL is going to be our database. Remember in the previous videos in the Merge stack, we were using MongoDB, but instead this tutorial is going to be focusing on using MySQL. Third of all is going to be cores. Remember, connecting to our API or to our database at times gives us some type of errors. So that'll just minimize or not give us any errors when connecting to it. So what I like to do next is just go ahead and you can go to your command line and just start up nodemon here. So we can just say npx nodemon and then the name of your file, which is server.js. And nodemon, it's pretty cool. Normally, in order to make updates and then actually see them, you have to turn on the server and then turn it off, turn it on, turn it off with every update, and it gets pretty annoying, to be honest. But using nodemon, it makes things so much better because with everything that you type in, it actually does it for you automatically, so you don't have to worry about going turning on the server and then turning it back off and so on and so forth. And then which is cool about nodemon is that with any little error, it gives you some type of reason for that error, and where normally it points to you where that error is, which is pretty cool. And then it kills the server when there's an error, and once that error is fixed, it turns it back on. Perfect. So now lastly, what we're going to do here before pretty much setting up everything is going to be just making some comments of things that we're going to need to do. So the first one is going to be connect to Express app. You can add as well. Second one is connect to MySQL. Oh, I cannot spell as normal. The third one is going to be our middleware. Oh, I didn't comment it out here. Our fourth and final one is going to be our routes. And if you remember from the previous videos of doing the Merge stack using MongoDB, we were making like a schema page. Really don't have to worry about it, just because using MySQL, we're going to be using the MySQL workbench, and it's going to be right then and there where you'll be able to actually just make the schema, which is going to be pretty cool. So now that we have our server.js file pretty much set up, let's go ahead and connect our Express app. So what we're going to do here is under connect to Express app, you can just type in the variable, and we can type in const app equals Express, just like that. And then once again, we're using the variable app to use the Express app here. So the next thing here is we're just going to want to boot up our server here. So we're just going to type in app.listen 3001, and it should be up and running. But remember here, just in case if you were having some trouble understanding why it's app.listen, so what we're doing is we're using the Express app to create our own local server, right? So what we're using the Express app in this variable app. So what we're saying is let's use the Express app to listen to any of the ports that the user wants to use. In this case, we want to use port 3001. So we're saying let's use the Express app to listen to the port 3001 and make sure that everything's good and it's up and running. So along with that, what we can do is just finish off with a function here, and then just type in console.log, and then inside of it you can just make like a message here so you'll know that it's working here. So we're just going to type in server is running on port 3001, and as you can see, nodemon is actually saying that because everything is pretty much working as it should be. So it says server is running on port 3001. So if let's say we said APSP, as you can see, which is the cool thing about nodemon, it kills the server and it actually gives you the error app crashed, waiting for file changes before starting. And then if you just scroll a little up towards the beginning, it'll pretty much tell you where exactly that the error is. So it's telling you, it's pointing here, apsp.listen 3001, and then it says reference error, APSP is not defined. So you can just go ahead and erase the S, and then you should be good to go. As you can see, server is running on port 3001, just like that. So the next thing that we're going to do here is connect to MySQL. So if you haven't done so already, you can go ahead to your Google Chrome and go to MySQL, their documentation, and then you can go ahead and download MySQL. And what you can download as well is going to be the MySQL Workbench, and which is what we're going to use to pretty much create our schema. So once you have it downloaded, what you can do here, it's going to be something like this. Once you start it, it should be asking you for some type of creating a password. And if not, what you can do is just open up MySQL just like that, and then go into your system settings, and then just type in your system settings. Oh, it's not there anymore. MySQL here. And then you'll see it'll take you here. So what you can do is just go to Stop MySQL Server, and then you can go to Initialize Database. And then once you go into Initialize Database, just like this, it'll tell you to type in the password, and then you can type it whatever you want, but I already have it here. So the password that I have is going to be just password. And then instead of using use strong password encryption, let's choose the use legacy password encryption. And then once you have that, you can just go ahead and press OK. And then it should still be, if it's not up and running, then you can just go ahead and hit this button. It should say Start MySQL Server, and then you can just go ahead and hit it, and it should turn green just like this. Now that way, once you pretty much have that here, you can just go into your MySQL Workbench, and you can just start a new connection. And you can do so just by clicking this plus button here next to the setup button or edit. And then it'll ask you pretty much for the connection name. And you can just type in, let's say, practice, right? Everything else you can pretty much leave here. And you can go ahead and test the connection. So let's just test it really quick. See if everything should be good to go. Now, once you hit test, this is where it's going to be asking for your password that you just created. So you can just go ahead and type it in here. And if you hit OK, it should give you this. Successful, made the MySQL connection. Awesome. Perfect. So now we can say that we are good to go. So we can just hit the OK button. And let's use the practice. So we can just click on practice. And then it should take you right then and there to the workbench here. So once you're in the workbench, the next thing that we're going to do is make our schema. So you can just go to the schema tab here and then just right click it and then just say create schema. And then it should take you to this page here where it says schema editor. And then this one we can just call it employee. Oh, let's just make it employee underscore info, just like that. Now you can just go ahead and hit apply. And then after hitting apply, it should take you to somewhere like this. And just check everything's good. So that's the name of our schema here, employee info. So we're good to go. And now let's just hit the apply button here. And then just hit close. Awesome. So we should have our schema ready to go here. So you can just go ahead and X out of this. And now what you can do is go into your schemas here and see this arrow or this caret. You can just hit it and then it'll show tables, views, stored procedures, and functions. You could just go ahead and click on the tables, right click, and then say create table, just like that. And now this is where we are going to create the table. So we'll just call this employee or employees. And then here is where you can go ahead and input the values. So for the number one, we're going to use the ID. And the ID, you can leave it as an integer because it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. So for the primary key, you can leave this opened or checked. And for the not null here, you can keep it checked as well. Now what you can go is you see this AI here, and which is the auto increment. You can just go ahead and hit that, which pretty much is every time a value is added onto your schema or onto the table or into the table, it's going to be giving you the ID of like 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. Awesome. So the next thing that you can do is come down here, click to edit, just double click it, and then you can just put this as name. And then for the data type, you can leave it at varchar. So we can just change this, and pretty much this is like the number of characters. So we'll just make it 255 here. And then what you can do is just for the not null, you can just go ahead and hit the check on the not null. And then lastly, we can just go ahead to the next column, and then we can just type in age. So after the age, instead of a varchar, what we're going to use is we can just delete this, and then we can use integer. what's going on, int, just like that. And with not null as well, we can just go ahead and hit not null. Perfect. So we're just going to have 3 values here, name and age, but the ID is going to be included. That way we can go ahead and make like delete requests as well as update requests using the ID as well. So now once we have that, we just go to apply here, and then we should be given here, and just double check it once again. So create table employee underscore info dot employees. You have your ID, you have your name, and you have your age. So we should be good to go here. And you want your primary key to be the ID. So we can just hit apply, and it should really take just like a few seconds there. And then it says you should be good to go, and just hit close here. Once you're here, you can just exit out of the table, and then you can just go to your tables now. You should see the drop down and just hit the employees there. And then you can just right click it and just go to select the first one, select rows, just like that. So you have your table here, your schema and your table inside of the schema. So now that we have that, what we're going to do now is connect to our MySQL. So what we can do is just go back to our server here, which is going to be our Visual Studio Code. And now we can just go to our server, and under connect to MySQL, we'll just go ahead and get started. But before anything, let's just add to our middleware. That way we can just get that out of the way as well. So for our middleware, we're going to use app.use and then express.json. That way things can be in JSON format. And then app.use, and let's use cores as well, just like that. And that's pretty much it for the middleware that we're going to be using. Awesome. So now what we're going to do here is we are going to connect once again to our MySQL. So we can just go ahead and type in const db equals MySQL dot create connection, just like this, and then parentheses. So inside of the parentheses are going to be the information that we're going to use to connect to our schema and our table. So we can just go ahead and go on to the next line, and what we're going to do is we're going to say user is going to be the root, the host is going to be localhost, and don't forget your commas as well, or now you'll get a whole bunch of errors. The next one is going to be the password, which is going to be the password that you just inputted or you just created. So that one was password that we're using, comma, and then lastly we're going to say database, and then this one is going to be employee underscore info, just like that. And if you're having trouble with the database, remember, if you go back to your MySQL workbench, it's what we called the schema here, employee underscore info, and then employees is our table. Perfect. So now that we're done with this part, the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to finish connecting to it. So let's just bring this down here. That way everything could be pretty much next to each other here. So perfect. And that's pretty much it that we need for connecting to MySQL server, which is pretty simple, right? It's actually not that difficult, but as soon as you understand this part, it should be easy going forward. But remember, the user, you can find this as well in your MySQL workbench, and your host in the local host and your MySQL workbench as well. Because remember, when we came here, we go to practice. So let's just go to our edit here. And then if you go to practice, you'll see you have your host name, and then you have your port, although it's not asking for the port, but we have our username, and which is where we're getting this from here, our user root. And then we have the password, which is here, which is the one that you just created. And then we have the database or the schema, which is going to be the employee underscore info. Awesome. So now what we're going to do is pretty much set up our routes. And the routes that we are going to start with is going to be our post request. And I do this for every other video as well, but just in case if you were having some trouble just remembering what it was. So we have CRUD, and let me just type it in because as normal, it keeps giving me different snippets. So as you can see, we have CRUD requests. So the C stands for creating, the R stands for reading, U stands for updating, and the D stands for deleting, just like that. And then let's just make some comments, some / perfect. So creating is called a post request, like that, in which you're posting things like you can think of Instagram. You want to post an Instagram, I guess they're called a post, or let's use Twitter, for example, or X. You're creating a tweet, so it's going to be a post request. In order for everyone else or even you to see everyone else's posts, that's going to be a read request. So it's going to be called a get request. And also, if you want to update things, if you misspell things, or you just want to update it, it's going to be a put or a patch request. And then lastly, we have, as normal, a delete request, just like that. So those are the four that we need for creating a CRUD request, or 4 different types of a CRUD requests. So now what we're going to do here is we are going to start off with a post request. So we can just send that all to the bottom, and we're just going to type in post request. So let's get started. What we can do is we can say app.post, and then let's just make this like creating a post. So we'll make the path create post. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, actually, let's just make it post, just like that. Keep it simple. Now we're going to say rec res, and then just finish off with the function. So what we're saying here is we are saying, let's use the Express app. Remember, the app variable is coming from the Express, right? Because we want to use it. So we're using the Express app to post what's going to be inside of here, or our schema, inside of the path of /create. And in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to request the information. And then once we have the information, we want to respond with the information and do something with it, which is to parse it or to show it or render it in JSON format. So the next thing that we want to do here is let's just create the const of the 2 variables that we are asking for, which is the name and the age, which is coming from, remember, the schema that we made, which is, if you go to my workbench, let's just close this and then go back to practice, and then go back to our tables and employees here. Awesome. So as you can see, we have our values, name and age here. So those are the 2 values that we want to post. So our form is pretty much going to be, you have the form, it's going to have your input, and then we're going to have, just as we have it here, we're going to have our name, and then the employee age that we're asking for. So that's where we are getting the name and age. So once you have that, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to equal it to rec.body. And as you can tell, it's pretty similar already to doing just another MERN stack, but using MongoDB with making like a post request. So we're saying rec.body because we are requesting the information that's inside of the body. So remember, if you just take a look at Google Chrome back again, everything, this is going to be the path or the parameter here, and then everything inside of this is going to be the body. So any of the information that you see, it's pretty much the body. So just remember, whenever somebody mentions the body or rec.body, it's going to be the body here that you see pretty much like in the page of the path here, or the parameter. So let's go to the next one. So we have rec.body, we have const, name and age, the values that are going to be inside of the rec.body that we're posting pretty much inside of the rec.body. So now we're going to say DB for database, and then query, just like this. And remember, DB, we're using this variable. So we're taking everything here, and to make it easier, we're just putting it into this DB variable. If not, then we'll just say MySQL create connection, all of this, and then .query. And it's going to be a lot. So let's just make it easier and let's just say const DB with everything in it. So that's what that's where we are getting DB. So we're saying db.query, and then after that, we are just going to make parentheses, and underneath it, we can just type in insert into employees. And then we're going to say name, age, remember our 2 values, and then values, of course. And then we're going to use these question marks as referencing our variables, or our values, sorry, which are going to be name and then age. So if we had a third one, let's say birthday, it's going to be 3. So it's going to be something like this. But instead, since it's just 2 that we're using, we're going to be using name and age. And if you're thinking about the ID, don't worry about the ID, because the ID is automatically going to be added onto our values, or onto the schema. Perfect. So now that we have that, we can just go on to the next line here. And so the reason why we're saying insert into employees, because that's a statement that's needed when using MySQL or even SQL or Postgres normally as well. They have different statements to do different things. So in order to post something into a database, this is how you would do it in MySQL. So you're saying insert into employees, the name and age, values, and then you're using these question marks as a reference to the variables here. Or I keep saying variables, to the values here. So we are on the next line here, and then we're just going to once again say name in brackets and age. And then this is where we are just going to make the error and then the result, just like that. And then we want the function just like that. And then we're going to say if error, we want it to console.log values were successfully inserted, something like that. So now once we have that console log, we can just go on the next line and make our else. We want it to res.send, and then we're just going to say the values were successfully inserted. And what did I spell wrong here? Successfully, oh, missing the C. Awesome. Just like that. Perfect. So let's go and check to see if this is working now. So let's go back to our front end here, and we had it on our home. So in order to pretty much have it worked, let's just make our constants for our variables for our use state. So in order to do that, we are just going to go to the top here, and then we're going to use our use state hook, use state, and then our use effect. Where is it? Use effect. It's because I made that like that. Use effect. And then also, I forgot to add this as well, but we can just go ahead and open up our split terminal. Make sure you're in the SQL-Merm, which is our React app, and then we are going to install Axios as well. And Axios is going to just basically help connect to our API or our database. So let's go ahead and we're going to type in npm I or install Axios, and then that should take a few seconds, literally a few seconds. Perfect. Awesome. So that's pretty much done, and let's just go ahead and have it deleted. Should be the middle one. Perfect. I didn't want to delete this one either. This one. Awesome. So now that we have that, we can just go ahead and create the constants. And remember, if you're having some trouble with React hooks, just like use state, what I like to use is kind of like using a cooler, right? Let's say you're going to the beach and you want to bring some drinks such as water, you have juices, or anything else that you want, or any type of beverage that you would like to bring to the beach. You need to transport it, right? So what we're doing is we're using our cooler. So think of the use state as a cooler, and our variables, which is going to be the values from the APIs, and we're putting those into our cooler. That way, once we are at the beach, you can use those values, or you can use those beverages at the beach. And once we're at the beach, which is pretty much saying we're using the values, that way we can render it onto the page. And I'll explain it again once we are actually rendering this, so not to worry. So the next thing that we're going to do here is actually make the const. So we're going to say const, just like that, and we're going to say employees, set employees equals use state, and then brackets. And then we're using brackets because the whole value or the API is going to be an array. So now the next one is going to be name and set name, just like that, equals use state. And then instead of an array, we're going to use single quotes, or even the double quotes if you like as well. And the last one that we're going to use is going to be the age, set age equals use state. And as well as the top, we're going to use a single quotes or double quotes as well. Perfect. So now that we have that, what we're going to do here is we are going to just make a space here, and then we are going to make a handle submit for our form. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to say const handle submit and make a function just like that. And then once we're making it, we're going to say event.prevent default. And then don't forget to pass in the event as well inside of this parentheses here. And the reason why we're saying event.prevent default is because when we when the user, or when we submit the form, let me just bring this up. When we submit the form and we click enter here or submit form, it's not going to reload the page. So and what I can do as well is I can just put to the side and then put this to the side here and just move this. Awesome. So once we have, let me just make this a tiny bit bigger here. Awesome. So after we have the event.prevent default, what we're going to use is Axios. So in order to use Axios with everything else, we have to import it. So let's say Axios, import Axios from Axios, just like that. Now on the next line, what you can do is you can type in Axios, and you can do it together as well, but I like to do things separate when it comes to Axios. So on a different line, so I'll just use post on a different line. So Axios.post. So we're using Axios to post, remember that, inside of this path here. So the path is going to be http://localhost:3001. Remember, that's our port, which is here, which is in our server. And let's just go ahead and exit this out, which is in our server here. And this is the port that we're using here, 3001. We can say 3001/employees, just like that. And now on the next one, you can just go ahead and say then promise. And then you can just go ahead, if you want, you can console.log it. That way you can see if everything works. And then you can just say employee added. So when we add the employee and the age, once we hit submit, if everything's good, we want it to say employee added. All right. And then if not, we want to catch the error, and then just want to console.log unable to add employee. And just like that. The next thing that we're going to add here in our then right here under console.log is just going to be our name and age. And so we're going to continue here. So after the path, after this last single quote here, you're just going to make a comma and input the rect.body. So remember how we said rect.body was the age, the name and age. So those are going to be there as well. Now we can go ahead and add our set name and set age here, our use state hook. So we can say set name, and then we can also say set age, just like that. Awesome. So now when we enter the info and hit submit, it should work. But before doing so, we just need one more step here, which is just adding everything to our form. So if you go down to the form here, you can just go ahead and type in on submit, and then you're going to say handle submit, which is the name of this function here, which is saying on submit, once we hit submit, we want to create a post request here. That's adding to our name and to the age values that's inside of our schema or database. Next thing that we are going to do is we're going to go to the input here, and then we are just going to, after this border and the quote here, you can just go on to the next one. And then what we're going to say is we're going to type in type, and it's going to be text. If you want to add a placeholder, this is optional, but we can just go ahead and add a placeholder, and we want it to say name. And as you can see, it'll say name here. So after name, you can just go ahead and make a value and make that name as well. And then lastly, what we have is our on change, just like that. And then we're making like a function here. And then inside of the parentheses, we're going to make the event, which is E. You can either say E or type it out, event. But remember, if you are going to do that, it has to stay consistent. And I'll show you here as well. So we're going to say set name and then e.target.value. And then this is what I mean for the E. So if you're saying E here, it has to be consistent with this E. If you're saying event, if you're typing in event, it has to be consistent with event here. So as you can see, it's not going to be working, and it's going to give you the error if it's not consistent. So we'll just keep it to E. So what we're saying here pretty much is we are taking the name, and on submit, when the user hits submit form, we want it to go from here to our database. So we're grabbing it. So that's why we're using the e.target.value to grab whatever's in the input and take it to, or bring it to, our schema or database. So now that we have that, we can just go ahead and go do the same for the employee age. So let's go ahead and do that. It's going to be the same type, but except it's going to be a number, since it's a number. That way we can get the two little arrows up and down here. And the next one is going to be placeholder, and then this one you can say age. Let's just make this capital, age. And as you can see, if we reload the page, you're going to see age here now. So the next one is, of course, going to be our value. So this one's going to be age as well. And then lastly, it's going to be our onChange, in which we are going to pass in the event, just like that, to our set age. And then this is going to be value, just like that. And now what's left is going to our button here. And then once we are at our button, we can just go on to the next line and then just type in the type is going to be submit, just like that. Perfect. So we're going to see if it works. And by doing so, we're just going to inspect it and then hit the console here. So let's just bring this up a little bit more. And we can just go ahead and reload the page. I don't like seeing the errors there as well. So let's go ahead and check this out. So the name, we're just going to say, let's say Cactus. I was just watching wrestling the other day, so Cactus Jack, right? So let's say Cactus Jack is 33 years old. So we can just go ahead and hit submit. So if it's good, remember, we'll get employee added. If there's an error, it'll give us in the console.log unable to add employee. So let's go ahead and hit submit, and it's saying unable to add employee. So we can just go ahead and check to see what the error was here and why it's giving us an error. So I think I see why, because it was supposed to be create, sorry, not employees. So it's actually create, because remember we were, let's just take this index out. Remember how we were in our server, and for our post request, it was /create. That's why. I don't know why I was using the employees, but it should be create. Now let's hopefully go ahead and input it. Cactus Jack, age 33, and let's hit submit. Perfect. So as you can see, it says employee added. So now let's go to our workbench here, workbench. And in order to kind of refresh the table, you can just hit this lightning here. So we hit it, and look at that, guys, Cactus Jack 33. That's awesome, right? So let's add one more person. So we'll add John Adams, and let's say he's 55, right? So we'll say submit form. Look at that, guys, some employee added. Now, if we go ahead and reload it, John Adams was added, and now the age 55. That's pretty cool, guys. And we're doing this instead of using MongoDB, we're using MySQL. So the next thing that we want to do is make our GET request. That way we can go ahead and start rendering our database onto our page here. So let's go ahead and do that. So instead of using set name and set age, we're going to be using our set employees right here. And as you can see, it's not highlighted, which means it's not used. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing that we can do here is use our use effect hook. So let's just go on to a new line here, and then we can type in use effect and then make the function. And then for this one, we're going to call it fetch employees, and then just like this, parentheses. And the reason why we're making a fetch employees as well, just like this, is because when we enter a user or the employee, and we're going to render it onto the screen, we want it to show instead of having to reload the page. We want it to show automatically. So in order to do that, we have to pretty much refetch the data once again. So that's why we're going to be making a fetch employees here. So let's just add our dependency, empty dependency array here, and then on the next line we can just go ahead and say const fetch employees equals make a function as well, not 90, it's supposed to be here. Awesome. Okay, so now what we're going to do here is we are going to use Axios once again, and this time it's not going to be post, it's going to be get, right? Since we're just getting the information, we're reading it, right? We're making a get request. So you can just go ahead and let's just copy and paste this path here. And now I know it's not create because it's supposed to be employees now. And let's just double check it here. We go back to our server and we don't have it here. So let's just go ahead and quickly make the get request. So in order to do that, let's just go on to the next line here, add a comment, and we're going to say get request. And we're going to type in app.get, just like that. And then we're going to say employees. And then we're going to say rec.res, and then the function. So we're using the Express app to get the info that's going to be in the / employees path. And in order to do that, we have to make a request. And then once we have the information or the data, we're going to want to do something with it, right? So we're going to respond in JSON format in order to render it. And I know you see this code here, not to worry about it. It's going to be fixed in a bit here. So the next thing that we can do here is we're going to say db.query. And remember, we're using db because it's from here. We defined it. db equals this whole thing. So we're using db query just as we did over here. And then we're going to make the parentheses. And then we're going to say select, which is a statement in SQL or MySQL, select asterisk from employees, just like that. That way we can get all of the data that's inside of the employees. And then after that, what we're going to do here is just say rec error and result. And then we're going to finish off the function here. And then we're going to say if error console.log the error, just like that. And then if else, if anything else, we want to respond in JSON format the result because we're passing it in, just like that. So perfect, and that's pretty much it that we need for our GET request. Now if we go back to our home here, now it should be working because we have our employees here. So if we go back here, the next thing that we are going to do is just make our then promise here, which is pretty much going to be just like this. We're going to say on to the next line pretty much is going to say then, and then the function. And then don't forget to pass in the res as well, or the response. So now we can say console.log res.data. It should be coming up here. And as you can see, let's just reload the page. And as you can see, it's coming up here. Look at that, guys. So we have two. We have Cactus Jack and John Adams, and then their ages as well, 33 and 55, which is pretty awesome, right? So now what we're going to do is we are going to use our cooler. Remember, we're going to put in our beverages here. These are our beverages into our cooler, our set employees. That way we can use it later on when we're at the beach and we can render it, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So right here, what was it here? Here we're just going to type in set employee, just like this. So once you have that, the only thing that you're going to need is just to say res.data. Let's just move this to the top here just in case. Awesome. And that's pretty much for the fetch employees here and the getting the information. So now that we're able to get our information, we wanted to be able to render it inside of our page here. So let's go ahead and do that. So if you just scroll down here after these, the second div here, so after form and then div, we're just going to make a few breaks here. So let's say about 2 here. 2 should be enough. And then that way we can go ahead and make our horizontal line just to separate things here, and then perfect. So as you can see, we have our line there. And then awesome, let's just add one more here. That way everything on the bottom is going to be a little separated from the line there. And now what we can do is we can make a div here. Oh, what happened here? Okay, we're going to make the div, and then inside of the div, we're going to make an h1, and then we are going to say employees. That way it can show there. And then for our div here, let's just style it really quickly. We'll say text white, and then text center, and then P5. That way it can move to the center, and then just like that. Now the h1, we're just going to want it to say text 3XL. That way we can just increase the font size, and awesome, just like that. So after the h1, we are just going to make another div here. And then inside of the div, this is where we are going to use a map function. So we're going to say curly brackets. Remember, curly brackets, if you want to render something, you can use the curly brackets as well. So we're going to say employees.map. and then in parentheses, we're making this employee. So the reason where we are getting employees from is, remember here, employees. So we're putting the get request. So all of the data, all of our beverages are going to be inside of this set employees variable. So we're saying employees, and you want to map through the whole API or the database there. So we're saying employees.map, and then this can be anything you want, but you just want to be consistent with it. So we're gonna just leave it employee, just singular, not plural. So after that, what we're gonna do here is just make an arrow, and then go on to the next line, and then you can make another div here, just like that. And then after that, you can just make a UL, and then you can make an LI here. So we're going to make 2, but just for now, that way we just wanted to render that way we just wanted to render our first thing. That way we can see it. That way we can just render our API here. So we're just going to say, to see if it works, curly brackets employee.name. So it should, perfect. Look at that, guys. So now we are rendering the names here. That's pretty awesome, right? So now let's go to the next one. So we're going to say li here, and then this one is going to be, if you guessed it, employee.age. And look at that, guys. So now we have Cactus Jack and John Adams. That's awesome. So let's go ahead and add another one here. So let's just bring this a little bit down here, and let's type in Denzel Washington, and then let's say he's I don't know, 56. So we can hit submit form, and as you can see, employee added. But look at this now. He's not showing because we have to reload the page. So once we reload the page, he's going to be added here, Denzel Washington. But there's something that we can do in order to have it just, since the page is not reloading because we are preventing it. Remember, we had at handle submit event.prevent default. So we're preventing the form to take its action, which is reloading. So we can just go ahead and just refetch it. So that's why I decided to make this use effect here. So we can just use the fetch employees to refetch the get. So let's go ahead and do that. So if we just go to fetch employees here after the console log, we can just go ahead and have it added there. So we're going to add, sorry, not the fetch employees. Instead, it's going to be here in the handle submit, and then we're going to say fetch employees. So we're going to say fetch employees, and then you're going to call it just like that. And now let's add another actor. We'll say Will Smith, and let's make him 24. So now once we hit submit, it should come out here automatically. So hit submit, and look at that, guys. Now it's there automatically, and we don't have to reload the page. Perfect. So what we're going to do now is work on another request, and it's going to be our delete request. Then after that, it's going to be our put request or update request. So let's go back to our server, and then let's just add our delete request just like that. So right underneath it, what we can type in is app.notGet or not post, but remember, since we're using the delete request, it's going to be delete, just like that. And then we want it to be in the employees path. Now, when using the delete request, it has to include the ID because we want to delete the whole thing, right? So if it's, let's say, Cactus Jack, we're deleting Cactus Jack, the whole employee, and their age, or whichever other value that you decide, their birthday, their hire date, their salary, etc., etc. It's going to delete the whole thing as one because of the ID. Okay, and as you can see here, if you go to the API here, you can just see ID here. So it's given 1, 2, 3, 4 in increments. Perfect. So let's continue. So we're using the Express app to make a delete request. What's inside of the employees /ID path. So after this, we're going to do the normal request and respond with the info, right? So what we're going to do here is make a variable const ID, since we're just going to be using the ID. So we can just say const equals rec.params. Remember how I mentioned over here it was name and age, the rec.body. Now it's using the params because that's the path, as you can see over here, or the parameter here. So we can just continue. So we can just say on the next line, DB, and remember we're using the DB from here, from the whole connecting to the MySQL, db.query, and now we're going to use a delete statement, which is delete from employees where ID equals question mark, just like that. And then we're going to say ID because that's what we want to include. And now once we have that, we can just go ahead and make our error and result. And now finish off with the function. And now if there are any errors or results, we're going to say if there are any errors, we want to console.log, and we want to say the error. Else, if there are no errors, we wanted to say res.send, and we wanted to give us our results, just like that. Or result, singular. So once again, we're using the Express app to make a delete request from this path here. And we're using the, in order to do so, we have to request the information and we have to do something with the information, which is respond with the information to do something with it, which is rendering it onto the page, right? So we're using the ID from the request, which is the parameter or params. And then inside of the DB, remember this is our database for our MySQL, we're using a query statement, which is delete from employees, where ID equals question mark. And question mark is basically coming from like representing the values as well here. And then after it, just make a comma, and then you're going to type in the ID because that's what we are going to be looking after, the ID. And then we're going to say error result inside of the parentheses and finish off the function. If there are any errors, we want the console.log the error. Else, we want it to render in the result. Perfect. So let's go ahead and just go back to our front end here, our home page. And what we're going to do now is just add our button. That way we can just go ahead and delete it. So if we just scroll down here, we can just add our button, and our button, we can just make it before the employee name. So we can say button, just like that. And then the button is just going to be an X. That, and then we just want to make a class name, and we want it to this li. Let's just add some padding to it as well. Class, and then let's add a padding of 4. Oh, not that, 4, just like this. And then the button, the class name for the button, we want it, as you can see, it's a little too attached to the Cactus Jack there and to the John Adams. So let's just add some space onto it. So let's just add a translate X, and just like that in brackets. And then we're going to say minus 20 pixels. So that way we can move it to the left. And as you can see, it's moved to the left. Perfect. And now we want it to be bold. So we can say font bold. And then lastly, we want a hover effect, right? So we're going to say text, use that nice zinc color, and we can say 700. And then once we hover over it, it should, oh, it's because it's not, there we go. Now look at that, guys. Now it's hovered on a different color. Perfect. So now, lastly, what we're going to do here is just add our handle delete. So instead of doing a handle submit, we can just make it a handle delete, similar to here, a function as well. So we can just make a const, and then we can say handle delete. and then just finish off with the function here, just like that. And now if we wanted to, let's just separate this as well. So let's just comment this out and then say this one is going to be submitting form. And this one is going to be deleting employee. And then the top here could be just fetching employees, just like that. Perfect. So let's go back to this function here, this handle delete function, and then we'll use, of course, again, we're going to use Axios. And then we're going to say dot now, not get, not post, but delete, right? So we're going to say dot delete, and then we are going to, you can just copy and paste this one here, this pathway, just like this here. So now the only difference is, instead of using these quotes here, we're gonna use backticks, string interpolation. That way we can kind of like manipulate the path, right? So we can just use the backtick and then paste the path here, or the link, and then we can just type in /, use the money sign, and then the curly brackets, and then just use the ID there. Now you're going to get this error here, and we can fix that easily just by passing in the ID, which is going to be inside of these parentheses here, just like that. And as you can see, it was deleted there. Oh, this is perfect. So now what we're going to do here is we are just going to go on to the next line, and then of course make our then promise here with the function, and then we want it to console.log employee deleted, just like that. And then if there are any errors, of course we want to make sure we catch it, so we're going to say error console.log unable to delete employee. Awesome. So now that we have that, the only thing that we can do is just add our fetch. Remember, we just want that part to reload. So we'll just say fetch employees, and then don't forget to call it just like that. Perfect. So now lastly, what we're going to do is just go back to the button here. So we have the button, which is here. And then let me just, that way it's not a little too much confusing. Let me just X out of everything here. Okay, perfect. So we can just go to the button here, and we can say on click. And then on the on click, what we're going to do is we are going to make it use or pass in this function, this handle delete function. Okay, so the way we go about doing so is just making a parentheses and then a function, just like that. And we're going to say handle delete, and then we're going to say employee ID inside of the parentheses, just like that. Awesome. So now let's go and give it a try. So what we can do here is just reload the page. Everything's reloading, and let's just reload the page, and everything's reloading. And let's just add this key in here. That way we don't get that message here. So we're going to say employee.id. That way it'll just go away, and perfect. It went away. So now let's go ahead and take out Cactus Jack. Perfect. Look at that, guys. Employee deleted, and now instead of 4, there's 3. Now John Adams, let's go ahead. Awesome. Look at that, guys. And now if we go to our workbench, I know it says we only have 2. Now it should just say Denzel Washington and Will Smith, right? So let's go ahead and reload it, and look at that. Denzel Washington and Will Smith and their ages. That's pretty awesome, right, guys? And then as you can see how the refetching was working, instead of having to reload the page, it happens automatically within this small, you can call it like a little component here instead of the whole thing, which is definitely much easier for the user to experience, instead of having to always reload the page in order to see the changes. So lastly, let's go ahead and make our put request or update request. So let's go back to the server here, and I like to always have the delete request last. I don't know why, but it's just like a me thing. But let's go ahead and make the update request here. And then right underneath it, it's going to be similar, as you can see, app.delete, app.get, app.post, which is similar to what we've been working on before in the previous videos. So we're going to say app.put, okay, because it's going to be an update request. And then we want to use this path here, the employees, just like that. Okay, and now we're going to say rec.res and then finish off the function. So we're using the Express app, remember, which was here, the Express app, to make a put request using this path here, which is the /employees. In order to do that, we have to use we have to request the information, and once we have the information, we have to do something with the information, right? So we're gonna make a response with the information to render it or to make the changes. So we can continue. Let's make a const, and with the const, we're gonna be using the ID. Remember, because we're using the ID, and then this is going to be params. rec.params or equals rec.params, sorry, equals rec.params. And then we're going to say const name equals rec.body. Just like that. And we're just going to be doing it for one of them, but just for the name. But if you wanted to do it with the name and age, it'll just be like this, name and age. Okay, but for the update, we're just gonna do for the name. That way, if the name gets misspelled, we can just go ahead and spell it the correct way. So now, what we're gonna do on the next line is we're gonna say DB. Remember, we're getting the DB from here. Once again, so we can go ahead and use the DB dot query, and then open parentheses, and inside of the parentheses, we are going to make the statement of update employees set, and then name equals, remember we're using the question mark to represent the value, where in caps, ID equals, and then another question mark, because you don't know what the ID is or the name is, right? So we're just going to use those to represent a name and an ID. So after that, what we're going to do is we are just going to, in parentheses, have the name and then the ID. Perfect. And don't forget the comma as well. And then once we have that, just as everything else, we want to make sure we see an error and a result. And then we are just going to finish off with the function here. And then we're going to say if there's an error, we want it to console.log the error. Else, we're going to say res.send. And then we want it to render the result or give us the result as the parameter. Okay, just like that. Just like that, guys. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to head back lastly to our front end. And that way we can just make everything, render everything. So let's go to our home, and then let's just scroll up here. So we can make it in between here, and then we're just going to say update employee name, like that. So just as we did with our form and our handle delete, we're going to do another similar function, and we're going to say const update name equals, and then parentheses, the arrow function, and then the curly brackets to finish off the function there. So now what we're going to do here is we are going to make a new variable for our cooler, remember? So we're going to say const, and this one, actually we don't need to do that. So we're going to say const, and then this one is going to be new name, set new name, just like that. Then equals use state parentheses and then single quotes or double quotes. Perfect. So now we can just go head back down to our update employee name here. And then after that, we'll just continue. So we'll use, of course, Axios to connect to our database or API. And then we're going to say put because it's a put request. And then this is where our, right here, our path is going to go into. But now we can also use the string interpolation with the backticks because we're going to, once again, be manipulating the path, right, because of the ID here. And then we can just go ahead and copy and paste that here. Just like that. So we can just go. So now that we finished off with the function here, we can just go ahead and add the const because we're going to be using our use state, and we're going to say new name and then set new name, just like that, equal it to use state and then parentheses and then the single quotes or double quotes. Awesome. Now we can just go ahead down and then we can just continue. So we're going to use Axios. Remember, Axios is for connecting to our API or our database. And now we're going to say Axios.put, just like that. And then now we can just go ahead and copy, let's not copy this one, employees. Let's copy this path here, employees, and then we can just input it right then and there because that's the path that we're going to be using. So now we're going to be adding what we want to be the value that we want to be changing, which is going to be the name, colon, and then new name, just like that. And then you can just hit the comma and then type in ID, and you want the ID to be the same, the ID. And now you're getting this error here, and the reason why is because the last thing that we need to do is just pass in the ID, and it should go away just like that. Awesome, guys, we're almost done. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say use the then, just like that, and then fire off the function, and we're going to say console.log employee was updated, like that. And now what we can do is just make another fetch. Remember, we want to refetch it, that way it reloads in that little section there. Actually, we don't need that. We can just do that. And lastly, we can just go ahead and catch any errors. If there are any errors, we want it to pass in an error, and then we want it to console.log. And we want it to say unable to update employee name. Just like that. Perfect, guys. So now we're done with the update name here for our function. And if we just scroll down here, what we're going to do is just a few more things here, which is the first one is we are going to add a button and then an input. So and it's going to be right next to the name here. So let me just add another line here. That way it doesn't get too overwhelming there. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make the input just like that. And then if you want, I think we can just add a little line. No, actually, no, it's not working. But okay, so we can just add the input. And then for the input there, we can just go ahead and make, go on to the next line and make another button. I know this is normal. This isn't normal practice to have everything like clustered up in there, but I'm just doing it because it's the most simplest way as well here. So for this button, I'm going to say update. So what we're going to do with this input, we're just going to style it a bit as well. So we're going to say class name. We want the background to be Zinc 600. Not Zintz or Zintz, Zinc. Okay, perfect. So we want that to go just like that, and then we want it to be P1. That way it's not too close to the as you can see, too close to the border there. Perfect. And for the button here, what we want for the class name is just to be just like this. We want class name border, and then on hover, let's give it a teal color. Of course, that's my new favorite color that that I mentioned in every video. And let's just give it an opacity of 80, just like that. That way, if they hover, they can just see it just like that. Awesome. So let's finish off here, guys. So the next thing that we're going to do here is just as we used our handle delete, we're going to go to our in our form, we're going to go to our input just like this. And then we are going to make the type. We're going to say text. We're going to say placeholder update name, just like that. We could just pay update. Awesome. And then after that, we can just make the on change, and then we can just say E because you're grabbing the event dot target, just like that. And then just make the arrow as well, and then you're going to make it to the set new name. So inside of the set new name, it's basically going to be e.target.value, just like that. Okay. And lastly, what we're going to do here is for the button now, we're just going to make it on the new line there. Where did it go? Okay, on the new line. And then we're just going to make an on click. And then we're going to pass the function just like that. And we're going to say update name. And then inside, just as we did with the delete, handle delete employee.id, we're going to use the employee.id as well. So now it should be pretty much done and ready to roll. So let's give it a try. And if there are any errors, we'll definitely go over it and see what that error was. So let's just refresh the page. And let's say Denzel. We wanted to change from Denzel to George Washington, right? So let's say George Washington. Let's click update. And it looks like it wasn't. So what's going on here? Let's take a look here. All right, guys, so I found out why it wasn't working, and it was pretty much because of this here. If you go to the server, so as you can see, let's just go from the beginning here. So let's just reload, and we want to change Denzel Washington to George. I cannot spell George Washington, right? So we click update, but nothing's happening, although it says employee was updated. And that's because if we go to our server, it says in our put request, it says const id equals rec.params. It's not params because we're not using the parameter here. So it should be still rec.body because we're adding it. Remember here, we're adding it here as well. So that's how we're changing it instead of we're changing it here as we have it over here and as we have it in the previous videos of the MERS stack using MongoDB. But that's pretty much why. So now as we can see, let's just reload the page here and we'll add George Washington as well here, and then let's update it. And now as you can see, it was changed, George Washington, and employee was updated. So now if we go back to our MySQL workbench, let me just I think I had it already changed. Oh, Denzel Washington. We can just go ahead and reload it and it'll say George Washington. Now let's change Will Smith to Cactus Jack. So we're going to say Cactus Jack. And now we hit the update button. And look, it was updated, Cactus Jack. And lastly, let's just go ahead and reload. And look at that, guys. Cactus Jack with age 24, although with this type of update, it's just going to be the name. You're not going to be changing the whole info that's inside of the employee. But as we can see, it's working. So everything's pretty much going good for us in this short application here. So I hope you guys have really enjoyed this video. I thought it was pretty good because I know that we stuck with through a few videos doing the MERN stack using MongoDB, but this will be a little different using MySQL. And I know that you guys might get some errors when trying to connect with MySQL. That's what happened with me a lot of the times. But just remember, if you just go back here and you go to MySQL, you just open it up right inside of your system's preferences on a Mac. Let's just let that load here. If it's not gonna load, okay, so we'll just MySQL. For some reason it's not loading on my end. Oh, there we go. So once you have it here, you can just go ahead and stop the server, initialize the database, and just change the password, and that should work. And once you change the password, don't forget to use the legacy instead of the create the strong one, the first one. It's gonna be the second option in creating a legacy, and then hit finalize or apply, and then start your server, and then you should be able to connect pretty good with your to your MySQL workbench using the new password that you created. So I'm looking forward to the next video, guys. And if you like the content, please give it a thumbs up or even subscribe. That'll help a lot. That way I can just keep on knowing that all of this this info that I'm putting out or the content is helping you guys out, because I definitely just want to be able to help anyone that's struggling, just as I struggled as well. So see you guys next time and have a good one.